Hello everyone, my name is Shambhavi. Hope you all are doing well. So today we are going to start a new topic and that is SQL for data science. It means the structured query language for data science, right? We'll be seeing out this topic in a very much detail. We'll be seeing about first of all that what's the history about SQL, then what's the use, how we just use that, and what are the advantages, disadvantages. These are all of the things that will be covered in this particular video, right? So without wasting time, let's get started here. So let's start with the history about SQL. Let's learn a little bit that who developed it, like SQL and in which year it was developed and all those things, right? So here goes the history about SQL. So in the 1970s, SQL was developed by Raymond F. A. Boyce and Donald D. Chamberlain. So these red colors, which are just marked out here, so these two are the persons which developed SQL in late 1970s. Okay, and it was developed actually at IBM, and its previous name, actually some people call it right now as well, that it is the name is SQL actually. Many people just call it as SQL as well right now. Okay, fine. So it was designed for manipulating and retrieving data stored in the original quasi-relational database management system of the IBM. That is the other thing. Just do not go into that definition for now, because when we'll be seeing out that what actually this means, that SQL means, then we'll be moving on towards the definition as well. Right, so this was the first commercial implementation of SQL was introduced in June 1979 by Relational Software for VAX computers, right? Now, whatever I've just written out here from this, there are two things which you can just note down or just have a remember of. That first of all, it was developed by these two persons at IBM, and second, that it was commercially implemented in June 1979. Right. So this was a little bit history about SQL. Now let's move towards the definition, that what actually structured query language means, right? So SQL, that is a structured query language. It is a programming language used for querying and managing data in relational databases. Right. Now, what do we have actually? The companies like the MNCs, like let's say take the example from Amazon or Facebook, whatever we just take. So there are a lot of databases, right? We have a lot of data into that company. So SQL is a type of programming language. Okay, we cannot just say that it is any other language. It's a type of programming language only, which is actually used for managing that data into the relational databases. This is what the use of SQL, and this is the definition, right? SQL is the most widely implemented database language supported by the popular relational database systems like MySQL, SQL Server, and Oracle. So these two examples which I have given you right here, that is MySQL, SQL Server, and Oracle. So these are the three database systems, most used database systems in which SQL is widely implemented. Right, so hope you just got the idea that what we just meant from SQL. So like if anyone comes to you and asks out the definition for SQL, so you can just go ahead and tell that SQL is the most widely implemented database language supported by the popular relational database systems. Okay. Great. After this, everything is okay. We just understand that what is SQL, that is structured query language, how like when it was developed and all those things. After this, the very important and the main thing that comes to understand is the applications. That if you are studying out a particular thing, then what is the application? Why you are actually learning out that thing, where you can just apply that out. What are the fields where you can just pick it up? Right, so let's learn that thing, that basically what are the applications of SQL. So the very first application is data integration scripts. So the main application of SQL is to basically write out the data scripts. Okay, write out the data scripts. Which is basically written by the data administrators or the developers, right? The main application of the SQL is to write out the data scripts which are written by the data administrators or the developers, right? So that is the very first one, which is data integration script. Second one is to retrieve out the information. As I told you in the previous topic as well, that basically whatever the like data we are having, from that data we just try out to retrieve out some information, retrieve out some important information. So that can be done mostly by putting out some functions, applying out some elements, and all those things you need to do out for retrieving out some subsets from a particular information, right? So this is what is called as retrieve information. So let's read that out. So another popular application of this language is to retrieve the subsets of information within a database for analytics applications and transaction processing. So why we just retrieve out that data or just collect out the subset of the information? So as for the analytics application and transaction process. Now, what is this analytics? Analytics is basically plotting out the data into another forms and some gathering out some information from that data, and this is what actually comes in the analytics. Okay. So the most commonly used SQL elements are select, insert, update, add, delete, create, truncate, and all those. These are some of the most commonly used elements in which we are actually having into the SQL programming language. Right. So second one was about the retrieve information. Now third one is basically the other important applications of the SQL. So it is basically used for the modification of the database. Okay. We all know that what is a database. Database is a collection of a data, right? So into the tabular form. So SQL is basically it is purposely used for the modification of that database table which you are having. Okay, so in addition, the users can add a row, you can delete out a row, you can update a row, you can create a row, whatever you just wish out, you can just do all those things with the help of the SQL, that is a structured query language. Right, so hope you just got the idea about some other important applications of the SQL as well. So these are the three important applications that I mentioned to you. First one was a data integration script. Second was to retrieve the information. And third was basically other important applications. Right? Now, whenever we just talk about any of the language, either it is a programming language or any type of language, we have two things commonly in that. The first one is the advantages of that particular language, and second one is the disadvantage. If anything is having advantage to it, it will surely have some disadvantages as well, right? So first of all, we're moving towards the advantages of SQL. That's what are the advantages, that why we should use it, and then we'll be seeing about the disadvantages. Fine, right here. So basically, let's start with the advantages first of all. So my very first advantage says that large amount of data is retrieved quickly and efficiently. Okay, in the last topic I just told you that there are many functions and many elements onto the SQL with which you can just perform out many operations, right? So with the help of the structured query language, what happens that let's say you are having a large amount of data, like let's say you are having a large amount of data. So with the help of the structured query language, you can just retrieve that data, that large amount of data very quickly and even in a very efficient way, right? So this is the very first advantage. That's why people prefer to use SQL language, okay? Second is the operations like insertion, deletion, manipulation of data is also done in almost no time. So when we are just going to learn out the SQL language, in that you'll be seeing out that as soon as I wrote out the command, that soon I just get out the answer whatever we are having onto that particular thing. So this is that. Let's say you just want to delete out, put out any operation or do out any something like that. So in that you are having many functions which you can actually apply, and it takes almost no time to give you the final output of that particular thing. Okay. Let's take a very quick example here. Let's say I'm having a table, a data that is having 10 columns into it. Okay, now let's say I just want to delete out the very first column. So I just wrote out the command for deleting out the very first column, and as soon as I hit enter, so my first row would be deleted, my first column would be deleted, and when I just try to print out my new data, so in that case I would only and only be getting that 9 particular columns. Right, so this is basically, it does not take too much of time in doing out these operations like insertion, deletion and manipulation. Right. Okay, now let's move toward the third advantage. Now, the very important thing is that for retrieving out the data. Okay, let's say many of you have heard about the web scraping. Web scraping is basically collecting out some data and using out that data, and it is actually done with the help of the Python programming language. Right, so for that you just need to write out a very large number of codes, let's say 20, 30, 40, whatever data you just want to retrieve out. You just need to do the web scraping and write out a very long code. But let's see if you just want to get out any data. So in this SQL, that is the structured query language, you do not need to write the number of lines of code. Only 2, 3 basically some basic keywords will actually try to get out some data from that, whatever you just data want out from there. Okay, so it's not the case that you are writing out 20, 30 lines for getting out one like some columns or some rows from a data. It's not that case. In SQL, what happens that you are having some basic keyword that is select, insert, into, update and etc. Basically we are having. So that are actually used for data retrieval of the large number of lines of code. Okay, so this is the another advantage for using out the SQL. Number fourth, we are having that due to the documentation and long establishment over years, it provides a uniform platform worldwide to all its users. Yes, you can just get out the documentation, gets out everything onto the internet, because this is a like very old language, you can just say out. Okay, and the very fifth one is that easy to learn and understand. Answers to complex queries can be received in seconds. Fine. So this is a very easy language to learn actually, because here you do not need to write out a lots and lots of code. Simply put out the function and you just get out the output. So this is why it is said that SQL is very easy and like easy to learn and understand. And basically whatever are your complex queries, whatever are your questions, your that answers of that particular questions, you will be just getting them in particular seconds, because it is having many elements and many functions onto it, which basically helps us to do the particular things. Right, so these are the 5 advantages which I had listed about SQL, that what are the advantages of using the structured query language. Now let's move towards the disadvantages of the structured query language. The very first one is that SQL has a difficult interface that makes few users uncomfortable while dealing with the database. Yes, this is a very, like you can say, a little bit of drawback in the structured query language, that the interface on which you write out the commands, that's a little bit different from the other interfaces. So you may face some uncomfortable, some unease, some problem while dealing with the databases onto that particular platform. Okay, this is a one disadvantage. Second is that some versions are costly and hence programmers cannot access it. Yes, some versions are actually which are actually a little bit of costly, so normal programmers we basically cannot access that out, right? And the third one is due to hidden business rules, complete control is not given to the database. Fine. So basically, onto the companies, you have different rules, right? Onto that you have the rules, you cannot share this data with this and that data. So basically, you cannot give out the complete control to the database. So this is one of the either drawback for the structured query language, right? So these were the 3 drawbacks for, or you can say that disadvantages for the structured query language. Now, we had seen that what's the history and what's the SQL, what's the definition, what are the applications where you can apply, what is the advantage, what is the disadvantage. But why we should learn out this SQL? What's the use of learning this out? Is there any particular use, or we are just learning it for adding one new knowledge to it? No, it's not the case. There is a role of SQL in data science. Let me just brief that out, that what's the use. Okay, so here we are just going to discuss about the role of the SQL in data science. We'll be seeing that why and how SQL is used using the data science. Why we just need to master out this particular programming language. So basically, why does a data scientist needs SQL? What's the use of needing, like what's the use of using that SQL of a data scientist? So basically, in order to handle the structured data that is stored in the relational basis. So this is the use of SQL in the data scientist, that let's say you are a data scientist, and why you will be using SQL, so that you can handle out the structured data and store that into a particular relational base. And after that, you can just apply out some queries to these databases, and this is why you should learn SQL for moving into the field of data science. Let me read out the sentence, that a data scientist needs SQL in order to handle structured data. This structured data is stored in relational databases. Therefore, in order to query these databases, a data scientist must have a sound knowledge of SQL. So in order that basically you are able to use out these relational databases and all those things, so in order to use that out, you should have a good knowledge of SQL, because whatever the data you are having, whatever the structured data you are having, that is always stored in a relational database, and that relational database can only be accessed with the help of the SQL, that is the structured query language. Right. Now, basically, most of you have heard about the tool, heard about a platform which is called as Hadoop, right? So basically, Hadoop is these are the platforms which deal with very big data. Big data, you had even heard about the big data as a buzzword nowadays, right? So Hadoop is one of the platforms which deals with the big data. So it provides an extension for querying out the SQL commands, which basically with the help of the data, you can just manipulate the data and perform some commands. So for that particular thing, this Hadoop is a platform which provides an extension for querying the SQL commands. Right, this is the another thing. Moving next, basically, in order to experiment with data through the creation of test environment, data scientists make use of SQL as a standard tool. Okay, let's say you had made out some data. Okay, let's say you just want to experiment out with some data, okay, and you just had made out any test environment for the you had just created out a test environment and you just want to experiment that with the data. So this is the case that where data scientists make the use of the SQL as their standard tool. Okay, they just prefer out doing the things with the SQL, that is the structured query language. Fine. After that, basically, in order to carry out data analytics with the data that is stored in relational databases like Oracle, Microsoft SQL, MySQL, we need SQL. So data analytics, I had already told you that what you meant by data analytics, that is to analyze the data, to store the data and to clean out the data, to perform some EDA and just coming to some output. This is what is called as data analytics, right? So in order to do out the data analytics with the data which you have stored in the relational databases, so like Oracle or Microsoft, in these type of databases, you are having any data and you just want to work with that data, you just want to perform some data analytics onto that data. So these can be accessed only and only with the need or with the help of the SQL, that is the structured query language. Okay. And the last one is that SQL is also essential for carrying out data wrangling or preparation. Therefore, when dealing with various big data tools, you will make use of SQL. That already I have explained in the above points, right? So this is the way, this is the need, this is the role of SQL actually in data science, and this is why you should learn the data science, because the learning of the SQL is not too much hard. It's a super easy language that you will get to know in a little bit of time. But you should even have the knowledge of that if you are learning a particular topic. Let's say you're learning SQL. So what's the use of that learning SQL? It's not the case that only learning and learning and learning. Where you'll be implementing out, what are the use cases, that all you should have the knowledge of. And these are all the things which I have mentioned in this particular slide, right? Now, let's move toward the very last topic, and here I'll be telling you an overview of all the concepts that we'll be covering from the next videos. So, we'll be covering about some SQL commands. These are of the 5 types, that is DDL, DML, DCL, DQL, and TCL. Okay, and under these, all the 5, we are having some subcategories: create, drop, alter, truncate, insert, update, delete, grant, revoke, select, commit, rollback, save. When these are some of the commands which we are having in SQL. So we'll be dealing with all of these here. After that, we'll be dealing about the key elements of a database, relational keys, select queries, joins, data modeling, fact and dimensional type tables, and star schema, snowflake schema, and the DDL, DML. All are these things which we'll be dealing up in the upcoming videos for the SQL. Right, so basically I hope that you had got a fair and a very clear overview regarding all the important information about the structured query language, that what's the history, when was it developed, after that what's the definition, after that what are the applications, what are the advantages, what are disadvantages, why we basically use SQL in the field of data science, and what are the concepts that we are going to cover in the further videos. Right, so hope you enjoyed out this video. So this is all for this video. Till then, thank you and take care.